The Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education hereby recognizes and commends the Springfield School District for its exemplary school bus maintenance program as evidenced by compliance with at least 90% for 15 consecutive years of Missouri school bus regulations and safety standards during the spring 2014 school bus inspection conducted by the Missouri State Highway. So 15 years consecutive that we've been over 90%. I will tell you that the state average is around 83% every year. So for us to be over 90% for the last 15 is a big deal. Russ Noe here is my maintenance supervisor. It takes a lot of us to put this together, but he leads the charge every year to get it done. And we do pretty much way better than 90%. We're usually 95, 98% when we go through those inspections. So hats off to Russ and his crew. And if you have any questions for us on that, we'll entertain them.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Now if I can have Mark Black and Robbie Cox come on up. You'll notice Robbie's limping because she sprained her ankle. We're going to have to, I don't know what we're going to do with her. This summer, 4 of our drivers competed in the annual state school bus safety competition in Independence, Missouri. And we did very well. First of all, newly certified driver trainer Roberta Cox took 4th place in the state safety competition in the rookie conventional. There's several different categories. Robbie's never competed in it before, and I will tell you that she didn't even know she was competing until the day before. So she didn't practice. She didn't do anything to really prepare or study because there's 13 separate events that you have to get through, and it's a pretty big achievement, which is a testament to why she's also one of our trainers because she's very highly skilled, and she brought her bling with her, so that's her trophy. And then we have Mark Black here. Mark was last year's 3rd place winner. This year, Mark took 1st place. Mark Black is this year's 1st place winner in the experienced conventional division, and he's the overall state winner. Not only did he win his division, he won the whole darn thing. Yeah, Mark posted perfect scores in 6 of the 13 events, earned a top score of 550 points out of a possible 660, and received a top prize of $400 that he used towards expenses incurred when we sent him to the 44th Annual International Safety Competition, which was in Charleston, South Carolina. At that competition, first time any of us have been there, I didn't go, but we had some folks that traveled along. In that competition, Mark took 9th place out of 45 conventional drivers, and he ranked 15th overall out of 100 competitors at the national level. And he's got all kinds of hardware for his. So, and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize, I've got some staff members in the audience, if you all would stand up. Because we have some great individual achievements, but the fact is, it takes all of us to do all this stuff. And without my staff and people that are really dedicated, and we all chip in, we all know what's going on, we all try to support each other, and it really, if it wasn't for the teamwork we have as a staff and as a department, we wouldn't be able to do the things we're doing now. So, any questions on any of this? Yes.
I have a question of both the drivers. Certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but I would just like to have a little bit of a description of what one of your events looks like, maybe what was most challenging or the most fun event, because having not been a part of that, I'd like to visualize what does that look like.
Don't be nervous.
I would say the offset, you drive through a line of poles, there's 3 on each side, and then you have to cut across and go through another one, and you do not have any extra room to get through it. So that was definitely my most challenging.
We also have a written test, and it was pretty challenging. Some of the questions are a little tricky. And we have several other events that we drive the bus through, cones and stuff.
Sounds like a very exciting thing
yes.
to watch. So, yeah, Mrs. Cowan.
I got to walk in with Mr. Emling and the staff, and I said, having been on the board now almost 12 years, the way I gauge the success of the beginning of the school year is 0 calls to my house about transportation concerns. And that has not always been the case. So I think that just speaks to the quality of drivers, the quality of maintenance staff, Mr. Emling's leadership to really take care of those issues and let people know what's going on and assure parents and students that they're in good hands. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr.
Just a
Osborne?
quick comment, and I've said this before, but oftentimes our school bus drivers are the first person that sees a kid in the morning and the last person that kid sees in the evening, and your bus drivers can be so important to those kids' lives, and I know we have bus drivers out there every day that are very important in our kids' lives, and they're an important piece of the whole educational process, and we need to remind ourselves of that from time to time because it is important. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you so much. Okay. That's always a very fun part of our meeting, the recognition. So we'll move on to Section 3.0, Agenda Modification. At this time, the board members may either accept the agenda shown below or on our items, or request that one or more of our general consent items be placed under items for separate consideration. We do not take a formal vote, but we do offer the board the opportunity at this time to make any changes as needed. So do we have any this evening?
Yeah.
Mr. Hosmer?
I would move to take, I think it was listed as 11.04, remove that from the consent agenda, the talent management technology contract.
Okay. Thank you. You'll note that will now be agenda item 9.03. Is that correct, Mrs. Luton? Okay. Thank you. So that change has been made. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. Move to President's report. At this time, Mrs. Bodine's going to help me out with just a couple of pictures that I wanted to share with you. You'll be hearing more from the board later on this in our meeting this evening of board visits to buildings and participation in various community events. But I had the opportunity to go to the Health Sciences Academy at Mercy. And I appreciate Dr. Hackenworth invited me to go. And as soon as I drove into the Mercy campus, I noticed students on the intersection. They're driving in, not in the intersection, but on the sides there with their color vests on, and they had clipboards, and they had on their red scrubs that the students there wear. And I was intrigued because I thought, we have some research going on here. We have, because you see the clipboards and the students actively engaged in the process. So I was very excited to get into the classroom and to see the facilities. When I got into the classroom, of course, it was empty because all the students were out collecting data. But what I thought was just such a great reflection on our district and the work was on the board. I took this little picture of the classroom rules, and I think we can learn much from what the students in that classroom established as their classroom rules of being respectful and being a team player, being helpful, and going above. I love the going above and beyond for others in a selfless way, and that just struck me as wonderful that we have 8th graders that are developing these norms or classroom rules. So I wanted to share that with you. And then we'll go to the next picture. And whoops, go back one. And this is an example of the students out. Each group of students had a Mercy, someone from Mercy, the personnel there with them. helping them with their project, keeping them safe. So we have a couple. The young ladies that were sitting were the data collectors, and then the young man standing up was the one watching as cars come into the campus. So the exciting thing is, once I got in the classroom, if you'll go to the next slide, then here was what was on the board: testable questions. And this is real science. These students are getting a taste of what is real science. And so what I found out a little bit more about what they were doing is that the trauma team at Mercy, they're preparing a public service announcement regarding the importance of wearing seatbelts. So they have the students out standing at the entrances and exits to the campus and checking for if you are a male wearing a seatbelt, yes, no, female wearing a seatbelt, yes, no, and they were collecting that data, and they will be compiling that data and assisting the trauma team in this PSA. So I just thought that was very exciting to see that already this soon in the school year we have such great learning going on. And whenever I left, I was so fascinated with the project that I then drove through every entrance and exit so I could just observe the students as they were collecting data. And then later, I know what I did. So go to the next. There's the picture. So I thought I went out and talked to the students and asked them about what they were doing, how much fun they were having, and the learning process. But then after I left and I drove through the entrances, I thought, kind of hate to tell them that I think I skewed their data by. So they probably have a female wearing seatbelt. Probably in their data collection about 5 or 6 times. It should really only be 1 time. But again, just a perfect example of some of the great things going on in our schools. And we'll have more to share, but I wanted to just share that great experience and what a fun time that was. And thank you, Dr. Hackenworth, for providing that opportunity to me. So, okay, that's all I have this evening.
Superintendent's report is relatively brief, just updating you on the Listening and Learning Tour, continuing. The public dates have been announced, the 4 larger public events, and then there's multiple others that are continuing to happen with student groups, teacher groups, parent groups over the next 5 weeks. I've got about 15, 17 scheduled, making presentations, had one today, so we'll continue to listen and learn, and having a great time in that process. Second thing I would make sure you're aware, release of the annual performance report happens on Friday from the State Department. The data has been released to media and to us at this point, but it's embargoed, so we can't speak about it until Friday's release. Remember that APR is based on the 5 categories: academic achievement, subgroup achievement, college and career readiness, attendance, and graduation rate. So that will be those will be the 5 measures that come as part of this report. And we will have information for you for sure at the September work session, study session, that dives into the data as compared to state as well as compared to peers and any other things relevant that we're able to produce. That's a quick turnaround because it's next week, but we'll have some things in front of you for that meeting. In general, the state release has released some information about their overall statewide data, and trends are down. Science, math, and communication arts were all 3 down for the 3rd through 8th grade, and of course, like typical, are up and down. I think 4 or 5 were up, 3 or 4 were down of the end of course exams, but we'll learn the Springfield data on Friday. And the third thing that I would mention is I have Scott Went here to give a brief report on the facilities and the projects that are going on. Just a brief update.
Good evening again. Just to give a quick update on the bond construction projects that are currently underway, starting with Kickapoo, as we look at the Phase 1A, which was the mechanical system upgrade, we did 30% of that work was actually completed this past summer and is done and operational. The remaining portion of that work is slated actually for next summer, which will include 63 classrooms as they do the remainder of that building. One of the advantages we will have next summer at that point is we will have the new commons area to help for some additional staging, which we did not have this past summer. The substantial completion date, as you can see on the screen for that, is August 1st of this next year. For Kickapoo Phase 1B, that was the commons, kitchen, and servery, cafeteria areas. The kitchen and the servery were operational for the first day of school. I'm pleased to report we did not have to go into any of our backup plans. It is our hope that in November, at some point in November, we'll actually be able to move the temporary wall further to give a little more space in there until we are able to complete that portion for 1B, and the substantial completion date for that is December 31st. So when the students come back for second semester, that whole area will be opened up and ready for use. As we look at Phase 2, which would be the auditorium, we are looking to bid that at some point during this coming fall. Currently, the plans for that project are submitted to SEMA and FEMA for their review, which takes 2 to 6 months, so we're in that period of time now. I have heard that things are moving quicker. We do hope that maybe it could be 2 to 3 months. That will also depend on national weather emergencies and things as FEMA goes through that review. As we look at the, and once we do bid that, you'll notice under substantial completion we have a 14 months is what we anticipate for that construction project once that is awarded. As we look at Glendale High School, which is the commons, cafeteria, and library portion, our substantial completion date for that project is October 30th, and at this point the contractor hopes to actually have the roofing over the commons area completed by the end of this week. At Sherwood Elementary, our new school under construction, we have precast panels and twin T's down on site being erected. They actually hope to have the gym area erected by the end of this week. A lot of other work will have to take place, but that is that safe room component of the new school. The Hickory Hills K-8, where we have the 4 classroom addition, we are in the process of reviewing final design drawings and looking at our last cost estimates, which are now in line. And we will be looking at bidding that this fall as well, and looking at a summer completion date of this next year. And the Fremont Elementary, the addition and renovation project, that is a project we hope to bid in February of this next year for a completion in fall of 16. At this point, the architects have been reviewing, and their design consultants reviewing existing conditions, also looking at all the plan materials from the prior project, and at this point also going through and assessing our current standards and programming to make recommendations to us to bring them more in line with 21st century learning. And so we look forward to that as we go forward. The other thing that I will mention is we have several bid dates or several projects that we're going to look at specific bid times for. The Springfield Contractors Association, like they did last year, is doing another forecasting for this upcoming year. They're going to be having a meeting mid-September where we'll be gathering additional information about what other projects are being bid in the area. So when our projects are ready to go on the street, we'll have that additional information to be able to evaluate the best time to get the most competitive bids we can. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John?
Yes. No questions? Thank you, Scott. That would be the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Okay, well, moving to now the section, we're going to move to 6.01, and the Board of Education welcomes comments from the audience about issues being discussed. In other words, this is a section for those comments you have that are address an agenda item. And so it's recommended that requests to speak be submitted prior to the beginning of the meeting. So at this time, Mrs. Lynn, do we have any comments related to our agenda items? Okay, so we do not have any at this time. Later on in our meeting, we will have an opportunity for those comments on non-agenda items. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Okay, moving to 7.1, there are no information items this evening. So we'll move to Section 8, action taken at our August 12 study session. So as discussed at our study session, a vote to approve a resolution against the override of various last-minute tax bills, contract with Scantron, which is a company that provides district assessment resources, a YMCA agreement. They were all approved and so recorded on this evening's agenda. The Sylvan Learning Agreement was removed for consideration by the administration. Okay, moving to Section 9, action items for separate consideration. We'll begin this evening with our ad valorem property tax rates, and I will ask Ms. Embry to come forward at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick. As is required by law, we did hold our public hearing for setting the tax rate, and some of the items that I would highlight for you that have been posted as pertinent facts and available for public view include that these tax levies that are being recommended this evening are based on state auditor calculation documentation and also using the Greene County assessed valuation data that has been provided to us. And this is a process that all taxing jurisdictions go through each year in order to set the tax levy. The interesting thing in public education, as you well know, we set our budget in June and then we receive very important information in August when the assessment data comes through. So with that, if there are any questions, I would entertain those. Otherwise, we are recommending for you this evening an operating levy of 3.5619 for purposes of running the school system. That would include salaries and benefits and supplies and purchase services, that type of thing. And the debt service levy calculated is 51 cents. And that is actually set based on previously approved bond issues of our patrons in the community.
So at this time, do we have any questions or discussion that Ms. Embry can help us with this time? Okay, so hearing none, do I have a motion that the board approves the 2014-15 tax rate as presented?
So moved.
Mrs. Callan has moved. Do I have a second? Second. We have a second by Mrs. Bush. So at this time, please vote. Very good. Vote is complete. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move to our treasurer's report, 9.02. And again, Ms. Embry, will you please come forward?
Okay. So bear with me as I change gears. Okay. So this evening represents a new beginning for us in Springfield Public Schools, and as you are each aware, we've had opportunity to dialogue individually about what you would like to see in terms of our financial reporting as we move forward. And I think I'm causing feedback. And I have summarized basically some of the changes. I'd like to cover those as a group this evening and talk about where we go from here. So this evening we would like to address these 5 components. That includes the new financial reporting structure, budget amendments and transfers, cash flow and fund balance, revenue, expenditures, and projections, and the budget development process. And this will be a very high-level conversation to pave the way for our future as we move forward. So when we met, we talked about our new reporting structure. We wanted to make sure that we were compliant with board policy and also state requirements. We want it to be relevant information, and wherever possible, provide system-generated reports to eliminate some manual work that has been done and gain efficiencies in that regard. I will say to you that Dr. Jungman challenged the entire leadership team to think differently about how we do business and weed the garden, if you will. And so in the finance department, that is one thing that we're taking a look at very seriously. I would like to thank Mr. John Everest. I believe he's right there, and also the team of the finance department that work each month diligently to prepare documentation in spite of having auditors present and closing out the fiscal year and working on accruals and all the other regular work that takes place. So thank you so much for that. This slide is basically what I wanted to do without having to drill into board docs each time. You'll see just front page screens of documents that you've already reviewed posted on board docs. And the message regarding our financial reports for bond funds is that we've provided you with this information each quarter accompanying the status of projects. And as we move forward, we will begin posting the financial component of our bond fund financial reporting each month and still provide you the status of projects on a quarterly basis. This simply represents the accounts payable check listing that we are required to provide you each month, and we'll continue to do that. It can be quite voluminous at times, and if we can figure out a way to gain efficiencies on that, we'll do that, but I don't think there will be any. This is an all governmental funds report, and I have had some feedback that perhaps we need to look at representing this in a different way. So as a reminder, this is a work in progress, and as we develop the budget projection document, we may take a look at changing that. But currently, this document basically provides you with the percentage of modified budget expended as compared to the same period of time last year, and that would be the focus for that information. It does include the funds that are listed there, not only our operating funds, which include general, teacher, nutrition services, and student activity, but it also includes the debt service, capital, projects, and bond funds as well. This document that is posted on board docs represents our investment report, and we have a myriad of accounts and work to attain the best possible interest rates possible given our limited availability of the maturity time period for those investments. This document represents our operating funds financial statement, and it currently includes funds 10, 20, and 40, which would be the general fund, and the teacher's fund does not have the nutrition services component or the student activities component, but as we move forward, we will incorporate those in there and strip out the capital projects piece. The budget amendment report is a new report, and we are now going to bring to you budget amendments each month. School districts do this in a different way from school to school, and in this situation, our plan would be that we start providing that on a monthly basis as opposed to quarterly or semi-annually or annually to provide you with the best information we have available at this time. And the next slide here shows a closer view of that blue highlighted section. I want to point out to you that this particular month we're providing a special budget amendment, and it is for the remaining opportunity of bond funds. In retrospect, we maybe could have included the entire amount for the June budget approval process, but this piece we will likely not spend this year. What this does is once those contracts that Mr. Wendt referenced, when we let the bids and we receive a contract, award the contract, we want to go ahead from a system standpoint and a control standpoint enter a purchase order into our financial accounting software. In order to do that, you need budget available. So we are recommending a budget amendment increase. The purchase orders will be generated. We may likely not cut checks in this current fiscal year. So we would then end up with a fund balance again the next year, and we would budget the full amount the next year, would be our plan moving forward. Want to note that if we didn't have that special budget amendment for the remaining bond funds, we would actually be offering you a reduction to our expenditure budget of $133,894. We are also showing an increase in revenue. The bulk of that is related to FEMA and the bond funds, but the total revenue increase is $1,085,000. Another highlighted section on the budget amendment document this month points out once again that we are still in the accrual window that will close August 31st, and we look forward to locking down our final data for last fiscal year at that time, and we'll provide you with that updated information once the audit is completed and we have final numbers. This is the second page of that budget amendment and transfers document, and each month it will be updated to reflect by fund the changes for revenue and the changes for expenditures, so that each month you can easily see the adjusted budget totals by fund. And that shows a blown up version of that, again showing you that but for the $21,277,000, we have very limited changes on the expenditure side. There are 3 separate documents that are provided to you that list the individual accounting codes and the amount and description of the accounting code, as well as comments with regard to why we have entered the budget transfer between funds or the budget transfer within funds or the new budget amendment change. And this is an example of a system-generated report. I will tell you that Kara in the budget department was quite excited about no longer doing the manual entry on the budget document, so that is great news for the department. Mostly what I would recommend with regard to looking at the information is especially pay attention to the budget amendment document, and that total ties out to that summary page that was presented to you previously. So this leads us to where do we go from here? One thing that we do want to develop, and we're in the process of doing that, is a projection document that in the beginning we will provide the actual prior year, the current year modified budget, original for now, but then modified as we go through each budget amendment process each month, and then 3 years projection data. And we know it starts to get a little fuzzy the further you get out, but it will be helpful for us for prioritizing our budget needs as we move forward and ensuring that our fund balance percentage remains solid. And these slides show you a snapshot of what that will look like. It will be based on object codes. So this is a section that represents the revenue, and this is preliminary information. Again, any changes to percent change or fund balance percentage will be affected by the final accrual data for previous fiscal year. The primary revenue codes are isolated out, as you can see, current tax and delinquent tax, those amounts. And again, this is operating, which means it's representative in this instance of Fund 10, which is General Fund, Fund 20, Teacher Fund, and sub-funds of the General Fund, which are the Nutrition Services Fund and the Student Activity Account. The next slide shows you the expenditure component, and again we have detailed information regarding each piece of the object code, and we have salary and benefits, with benefits detailed out because there are some interesting benefits to have dialogue about as we make decisions moving forward. Purchase services and supplies. This section represents if we were transferring money out of the general fund to the Fund 4 or 40 Capital Projects Fund. At this time, we do not have any transfers noted. In Springfield Public Schools, we are direct receipting approximately $9.2 million into the Capital Projects Fund, and there's one chunk of that could easily be deposited into the operating funds for historical data purposes, and then we could capitalize on the allowable Department of Elementary and Secondary transfer and then we would show some information here in this section right here where we would move that out. And I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but it all depends on how you want to display the information and keep track of it historically and for budgeting purposes. This document will always show our operating fund balance percentage, and that is in alignment with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education fund balance percentage, again representing the general fund, the teacher fund, and the sub-funds of the general fund. Each column, as this is developed, will have a section at the bottom that's representative of assumptions, so that anytime you're looking at the data, you can see what changes occur from year to year for our assumption purposes. And currently, we have assumptions listed for 2014-15 of the assessed valuation information that we received in August. So we have the $3.263 billion in assessed valuation. I need to indicate that the tax increment finance reduction, that is incorporated in the 3.2 million. So I did indicate that this is net, but I should add the word memo. That's just for your awareness of the tax increment financing values. That's actually in a good place for our system. The operating levy that we have included on an assumption that it would be approved this evening of 3.5619. And we are estimating currently at a 98.44% collection rate. One of the things that I will bring to you in the future would be taking a look at what has our historical trend been, and do we need to recommend a budget amendment to adjust to that average of our typical collection rate. We've listed the dollar value modifier because it is a primary factor on the foundation formula. That just says that basically it costs a little more in Springfield than $1 relative to other districts throughout the state of Missouri. Some school districts operate, it's cheaper in their systems, and so they may fall under $1. The Prop C revenue is based on the prior year weighted average daily attendance, and that information was provided by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in June, that we would budget for a $922 per weighted average daily attendance. We will need to watch that line because the revenue may not come in strong enough to support that. So that again would be a budget amendment that we could potentially bring forward in the months to come. We've also listed for your benefit estimated ADA for summer, regular, and weighted. On weighting on the foundation formula, we do receive additional an additional student calculation for higher free and reduced lunch participation for English language learners and also for special education. And that information is provided by the state of Missouri as well. The proration factor, the attendance percentage is currently estimated at 93.31%, and it's very important not only from an educational perspective that our kids are in class and learning, but it affects our state revenue. And regardless of the overhead that we experience, meaning we know we're going to run the bus, we know we're going to have a teacher waiting for those kids in the classroom, but if they don't show up, we take a hit on our foundation formula and our revenue is reduced from the state. The state adequacy target is currently still shown at 6,131. And that number, I don't know, Dr. Jungman, if you want to make any comment about that, but we are at risk if that number is not appropriately reflecting the actual state adequacy calculation.
I would just make a couple comments on this one sheet, and it represents some of our budget challenges. Obviously, the proration factor, 93%. $3.8 million underfunded.
I skipped that, didn't I?
Now that's a chunk of what we're underfunded, but it's not all of it because that's 93% of the 6131. The 6131 should actually be somewhere in the 6,500 range. Right. So the $550 million underfunding of the formula, half of it basically is in the proration and half of it is in the state adequacy target adjustment down. So really the number would be closer to $8 million of state withholdings for just Springfield based on a formula that is not funded. The other piece that I would point to is that Prop C number 922 like we said, that's what we're budgeted off of. However, the resolution that you passed last time dealt with sales tax issues and exemptions that would reduce the Prop C number, and that's the number that we've referred to.
So that state adequacy target, that's basically what the state says you should be able to educate a student
That's correct.
entirely, or that's their target for what they should?
It's their target, and it's based on a percent. It's the state aid. It's not all the local and all those kind of things. It's based on taking a percent, or the accredited with distinction districts, knock off the top 10%, bottom 5%, take the average per pupil expenditure of certain lines, lines that deal with transportation and food service, and those pieces get to the educational number.
So, I mean, our average is, I mean, 94
Right.
per student about?
We were actually 86. It depends on which number you use. If you use ADA or weighted ADA, so between 80, 81, 82, 80, 86,
and so
100.
But that doesn't represent all of those funds.
Right, but should this, I mean, technically be saying the state would be paying us 6,100 of that?
That number is used in the foundation formula calculation, yes.
Am I too off base if I think that we get about 25% of 84 from
We
the
get about
state?
25%
Right.
of our per pupil aid of our 8,400 from state aid. Now, the 6131 is the target that they try to bring everybody up to understand that they reduce off for local wealth.
Right, but I
So
think
you
it's
have a large
important for,
local
I think it's
tax
really
base.
important for our local patrons to realize what we have to do and what we have committed to do, and what I think our community feels is their responsibility to do, to make sure that we're able to continue to fund adequately what, and we're still, I mean, I think everybody at this table would say we're still behind where we really need to be, but you know, that 6131 is very deceiving in terms of what it means to Springfield.
You're correct.
Definitely.
All that to say, we will continue to keep you informed as these numbers change, and they will change. Unfortunately, there probably won't be favorable changes given our current revenue situation in the state. We've included also the demographer estimate of 264 new students. That is a conversation that we'll continue to have as we move forward regarding whether we need to consider a new demographic study, how we feel about the information that we currently have. Other local income, we have a memo note for you here just to point out that the Boys and Girls Club has committed the $1.2 million for building purposes, and that is included in our other local revenue. And we've not listed all of the changes relative to the salary and benefit information that occurred in this past year. I'm not sure how long that will make the report. We may have to go to a second page for assumptions, which would be fine. I would rather do that than shortchange what we're providing you. So we'll take a look at how we might make modifications to that. We also have noted that Capital Projects Fund expenditures include one-time expenditures for Carver Bus Facility and the Boys and Girls Club. I will point out that originally we included Fund 40 on the document, so I can actually take that off now, but we might convert that to reflect a transfer amount or some other information that we would include on this projection document. So again, work in progress, and I look forward to dialoguing with you about it next month when we bring that forward. I have a few slides for you that reflect our projected revenue and expenditures for all funds and also for operating purposes. I'd like to comment about that for a moment. So as you will see on this projected revenue all funds slide, we're showing that 65% of our revenue stream is from local sources and 23% from the state. This varies from district to district dependent on the formula calculation and the local support that you receive. So our total revenue, all funds, is $272,339,711. And when we take a look now at our projected revenue for operating funds only, you see that we don't see significant changes with regard to this. Let me pop back over and state, federal, local. Just slight changes when we look at the revenue side of things. The big difference is when we take a look at our all funds expenditures. This slide shows not only operating accounts, but it also shows the debt service. You see we have a 9% commitment for debt service obligations, or paying the loans that we have that cause us to have revenue for buildings. The capital percentage on expenditures, that is inflated due to the bond projects that are underway. And so in this particular instance, it's showing that salary and benefits is 60% of our all funds expenditures. The reason we take a close look at operating is because this is what it really takes to run the system if you extract out those anomaly situations regarding loans or construction. So when we look at our operating funds, you see that nearly 80% of our salary and benefits salary and benefits represents nearly 80% of all of our operating funds, and that is very standard in public education. We are a people business, and that's reflected here. Supplies and energy, 10.75%. Purchase services, 10.08%. This slide shows you our operating fund balance percentage trend over the past several years. You'll note that in 2009-10, we were at 7.23%. And again, this represents funds 10, 20, and those sub-funds 50 and 60. So this is truly in alignment with the DESE standard for fund balance percentage. And you can see that we did have some recovery on that fund balance percentage. In our system, we are, as we've noted, we're landing at approximately 16%. That may grow slightly or decline slightly depending on how the accruals play out for the prior year. We do have changes in our cash flow stream that are worthy of discussion. So this slide shows you that the green line represents the revenue. And as you can see, in July and August, our revenue was higher than our expenditure base. But then we got upside down during the fall months, and while we awaited the spike of revenue in the month of January when those local tax dollars came into our bank account. And then we continued the process again, and we're back where our expenditures are exceeding our revenue base again. You see the spike on expenditures in June when we honor our balance of contract checks for our teachers. And I should also point out that in the month of September is when everybody got on the system in terms of getting a paycheck. So that's the fluctuation there. The reason that we focus on that is if you do not have an appropriate fund balance percentage, enough money in your bank account to carry you through the lean times, then you find yourself in a situation where you have to borrow money to meet payroll. And that feels really bad, to borrow money to meet payroll. So that's why we do need to keep our fund balance percentage at a decent level. An auditor might stand here and say that we should have 20 to 24% fund balance, and that is a bit high. But if we kept it in the 16 to 18 range, that's great. And again, that shows you that change. I will comment, even when we were at the 7.23%, obviously needed to borrow money to meet payroll. I wasn't here, but I'm getting a nod from Mr. Everest that yes, we did. I would point out to you that the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, based on statute, a district is not considered financially stressed unless they fall below the 3% fund balance mark. But at 3%, we would be jockeying bills to pay, just like anyone else. Do I pay my electric bill or my mortgage? I'm not sure which. The final slide is a familiar slide for you, and it simply highlights that you've done work in the past with regard to a budget development process and calendar. I want you to know that we are working on developing that anew, and that work will be brought forward to you in the months to come. And at this time, I would entertain any questions you might have. I should point out that I did post an items of interest document Mr. Hosmer, you and I had a conversation about that, and I think I could do a better job of highlighting some of the specifics with regard to the budget amendments, and I will work on that for the future.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments? Mrs. Callan?
I know that when you and I met, I talked about the need, from my perspective, to have as much of this information that shows trends and things like that represented graphically, just because it takes so much time to weed through the detail. I mean, some people like that detail. So I appreciate the graphs at the end, but I would just encourage us all to, we all take in information differently and process it, and if you're kind of a visual, kind of just show me what the trend is, and I'm fine with that. That would be very helpful to me moving forward. So,
Okay. Questions, Mrs. Bush?
Probably comments. I think in the past we've either had too much or too confusing, or definitely not enough. And I'd like to see the important things highlighted, and as I've said multiple times here, a narrative that explains what the key factors are. But also there are a couple of forms that are very similar, but they don't comport somehow. So I'd like to have us discuss, I guess we're going to have some discussion at a study group about which of those forms and what kind of information we need. A basic discussion is at what level do we want to see transfers and accountability within the MSBA's recommendation, or DESI's. We can look at the second or the third digit, some cases fourth or fifth, but I would like for us as a board to say we're really most interested in knowing the transactions and the transfers within this digit or that digit of the budget. And so at some point I'd like to have that discussion.
Good. And any other comments, questions? Okay. One thing I would just like to say is that we have many documents before us, and I'm sure we all spent a considerable amount of time going through those, but we really appreciate the efforts of administration to work with us as we identify the level of information that we require to make the best possible decisions as we're moving into this new school year and already thinking about next year's budget, which is just really only months away. So thank you very much for your hard work, and for each of the board members have also taken additional time to meet with Ms. Embry and share what they need and what works for them. And so you'll see many of the documents before us tonight are a result of some of those conversations. So we appreciate that. We know this is a work in progress, and we're going to continue to work on getting where we feel like we need to be, what we're comfortable with. So if there's no other questions or comments at this time, do I hear a motion that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lee? Okay, will you please take this time to vote?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to, we have a new item 9.03 added to our agenda this evening, our talent management technology contract, and we have Mr. McKenna here for questions. So would you like to start, Mr. McKenna, or would you rather hear questions from Mr. Hosmer?
I'm happy to do whatever you'd like to do. If you want to provide me some questions, I'll be happy to respond to those.
And I asked to pull this, and I understand that this is specifically the technology piece around the teacher and staff evaluation, but it did kind of pique my interest a little bit, and so I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the evaluation process. And the first is, and I'd asked for a number of documents from you, and you'd shared those with board members, what we're currently doing and what those forms look like. My question is whether or not the current teacher staff evaluation aligns with the Springfield learning model. You know, we spent a couple of years developing that with an emphasis on critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. In my reading through the evaluation forms, and again, these things would be then loaded into the technology piece. I didn't immediately see that there was a close alignment with those goals, what we want to push out into the system, being aligned closely with how we're evaluating teachers, principals, staff, etc. So can you speak generally to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that one of the first things we did as a system last year when we began the pilot, which was actually a pre-implementation pilot we did with a very small number of principals, was to evaluate the alignment between the standards and indicators that were developed as a part of the state model and compare those to the capabilities and processes of our learning model. So absolutely, I would tell you that interwoven throughout the processes and capabilities, interwoven throughout the standards and indicators are the processes and capabilities, both from a teacher performance perspective, but also from a student achievement perspective. And just to kind of illustrate that for you, each of the 39 performance indicators in the state model that the district will pilot this year require evaluators to measure teacher effectiveness or teacher performance through 3 lenses, and one of those lenses is student achievement. So you could actually, if you wanted to, go through each of those 39 indicators, looking specifically at the student achievement or student impact frame, and highlight or look for themes of collaboration, communication, critical thinking. And I think if you did that, you would discover that there is a high degree of alignment between our processes and capabilities and the indicators themselves.
And the reason I ask is because I've learned that unless you're intentional about something, then it doesn't get done. So, we spend a lot of time and effort developing those and saying, here's what we want to put a focus on, and if we're not putting a focus on that in our evaluation piece, and if it's not objective and it's not transparent, then I think it's going to be another thing that we tried, and 2 years later we won't know anything, we'll forget it. So I think that's very important. The other,
if I can also just add one quick thing, I think the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak, there will be in our communication and rollout and implementation. We have to draw really explicit connections for evaluators and teachers, identifying how much alignment there is between our processes and capabilities and the indicators, and that's part of our plan as well.
The other thing that I didn't see in this, and again, I know this is just the technology, but and I don't know whether you can speak to whether there's an idea of incorporating student evaluation of teachers and or parent, but I think student more important maybe, whether that's something that we're going to be looking at in the future so that we can kind of get that put into the evaluation process.
Yep, absolutely. So as I mentioned, one of those frames through which the evaluator measures teacher performance is student impact. And one of the resources that evaluators will have as they judge that level of performance is a list of potential sources of evidence. So when the evaluator asks the question, where might I look to get evidence to measure a teacher's effectiveness in a specific performance indicator, they can go to this list and they'll find places that they could go and look for that evidence. An example of something that they might see on that list would be student surveys, student feedback, parent feedback, those types of pieces of data. And all of that can be used then in the final determinant of the level of effectiveness by the evaluator. So it's among a list of other pieces of data or evidence that could be used in measuring student effectiveness or teacher effectiveness.
And then finally a comment, and it struck me in reading through the documents that you provided to us that there was a lot of local modification of kind of the state mandates and what we're looking for. We kind of made it a local process, and it what really struck me as important was there was all sorts of achievement data in there, and it got me to thinking about this Amendment 3, which is coming up, which is saying you got to look at achievement data when you're evaluating staff, and it seems to me that's exactly what we're doing locally. So and now we're going to vote in November whether we want to force somebody to tell us what to do that we're already doing. So anyway, just a comment.
And I think a key to that comment is that we get to choose what student achievement. We get to collaborate with our teachers. We get to collaborate as a board about what is the right achievement data, just like we did at study session just a few days ago about what are the right measures.
Well, and also
unfortunately,
it also
it's not going to play out that way.
Talked a lot about growth throughout the year, which I'm sure that if we get, this Amendment 3 forced down our throats, it's all going to be about data point in May, and there you go. So.
And just to speak to one more point, and I know Mr. McKenna can echo this conversation, is that the important thing that we think that this new evaluation system will bring is that it's not just 39 processes and standards, right? It's narrowed down and personalized for teachers around 2 or 3 areas of emphasis. So it's customizable down to what you need and what you need and what you need and how it's different instead of one size fits all. So that's the power in this model. So.
Absolutely. It's specific customization to the unique needs of each teacher, and ultimately with the goal of trying to get our arms around what are the overall talents of our workforce and trying to draw correlations and analyze that. If we're spending 80% of our operating funds on staff talent, we need to make sure that we understand the full reach of that talent and where the opportunities for improvement might lie. So that's the ultimate big goal.
One thing I might add is I recall several years ago when the district brought on Cognos, the data warehouse system. And when that came, it was like an infrastructure that as a district then we were able to build those data blocks as aligned to or met our needs. And so am I correct in thinking that this is similar to that in that it is a data collection infrastructure and then we can build those pieces and parts that align to what it is we're looking for in collecting the necessary data related to our evaluations. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It is a data warehouse for talent. Yep, absolutely.
That's a good explanation.
And it's got to be so much bigger than standardized test scores, right? And for each teacher to be able to put their portfolio work, students to be able to put portfolio work and examples of achievement that we know is much larger than what one score on one test at one time means for kids. So.
Good. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so we do need a vote on this item. So I do need recommendation is that the board approves the superintendent or designee to sign a contract authorizing Cornerstone On Demand Incorporated to provide the technology platform to support our district's talent management strategy. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Callan, a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Hosmer, a second. So will you please vote at this time? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our routine action items. If there are no changes to the following action items, the board may choose to approve these in one motion. And at this time, do we have any questions, comments regarding our 10.2, 10.3, 10.04, 10.05? Questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. So do we have a motion that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted in agenda items 10.02 through 10.05? Mr. Rosenberry, do you have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Bush? And so at this time we'll have one vote. Okay, moving on to general consent items 11. You'll see items 11.02 through 11.03. And one thing I would like to, just as a reminder, our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules provides for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by single motion. Documentation concerning these items have been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed, as we've already seen this evening, from consent items at the request of any board member. So at this time, do we have any questions on items 11.02 through 11.08?
7 now, because we removed the one.
Okay, and we took 11.04 off, and we just voted on that, so we'll remove that. And it's 11.02, 3, 05, 06, 07, and 08. Thank you. So hearing none, do we have a motion the board approves each of these amendments as submitted in general consent agenda items? Do you have a motion?
Nope.
Okay, Mrs. Bush, and we have a second, Mr. Lee. Sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Section 12, information items. There were no information items discussed at our study session, so we'll move on into Section 13. This is public comments to address non-agenda items. The Board of Education will allow comments on topics not related to our printed agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes for each speaker, and Mrs. Luton will time those comments for us. And at this time, we have a request to address the Board of Education from Mary Byrne.
Mary Byrne from Springfield, Missouri, and I'd like to address the board about the AP U.S. History controversy. I don't know if you've heard about it, but that's my issue tonight. President Madison insisted that a government deriving its power from the people and a people without popular information or means of acquiring it was a prologue to a farce or tragedy or both. I'm asking for help from the Springfield School Board of Education's help overturning the College Board's new Advanced Placement U.S. History, known as APUSH, framework, as to avoid Madison's predicted tragedy. My interest in the controversy surrounding the new framework stems from my interest in the history of education and in the education of history. The survival of our democratic republic depends on the teaching of a balanced and accurate American history. The analysis of the redesigned framework conducted by a former AP History Materials author, Larry Krieger, reveals the framework departs radically from the traditional APUSH framework. The new framework usurps professional discretion of history educators who would be accountable to their school districts and students, parents, and basically themselves as a profession, mandating instead a skewed negative view of American history. It diminishes American founders to a minor role, and if they're mentioned at all, while emphasizing perpetrators of injustices and oppression. As dictated by the new AP framework, students will not learn about American founding as an inspiration manifested in the Mayflower Compact or as a worldwide beacon of liberty for the downtrodden. Rather, it displays the sacrifices of pilgrims and patriots prior to the American Revolution and of troops and civilians during World War II as minimal in favor of reflections on negative episodes such as destabilization of the American Indians and the Japanese-American internment. This negative effect of this transformation of America will affect all students, not just those enrolled in AP U.S. History, as publishers use the framework to align reading materials at all grade levels in preparation for tests parents believe their children will need to save money on college tuition. APUSH is a politically slanted document that will have the effect of displacing the full story of our national history. Sadly, the U.S. Department of Ed not only funds College Board directly with approximately $40 million annually, but funnels money through states to the College Board in the form of AP exam grants. A recently released Associated Press article said Missouri will receive $188,000 to promote participation in this College Board testing. I contacted state legislators. Senator Emery agreed to send a letter to the State Board of Education requesting they contact the College Board and request delay of the new APUSH rollout. I'm asking you, as elected school board members of the largest accredited school district in the state, whose families trust you to protect their children and their children's heritage, that you pass a resolution similar to the resolution passed in a North Carolina school district. I have a copy of that resolution I'll share with you. And formally object to the new APUSH history framework. Send a letter to the State Board of Ed and the College Board. In addition, I ask that you notify every parent of a student or emancipated student enrolled in APUSH U.S. history in this district of the content of the new framework. Missouri education officials must stand up to the elitist education establishment in Washington and make it clear our children will not be subjected to propaganda masquerading as history. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have one other request to address the Board of Education. Thank you for your patience. Mr. John Baker.
Thank you. Appreciate getting a chance to come. My name is John Baker, and I'll take a little bit of my time to commend to Dr. Jungman, to get it right. I've noticed in the paper that he's in a talk to the principal of Boyd School today. He's been to every school in this city, and with the short time he's here. It takes a lot of work, and I appreciate that. And he has said we were welcome tonight, and he's set up several other times that the public can come and talk with him. Folks, this is very commendable. Without saying a whole lot, this has not been true in the past. Thank you, sir. I'm going to say this to you. I grew up in Springfield. I attended elementary school, Reed Junior High, and what's now Central High School. I'm retired from a long career in music, and I was mostly minister of music in Southern Baptist churches, but I've got a lot of teaching experience under my hand. I've got master's degrees in music. Now, I don't tell you all that to impress you, except to tell you I do know what's involved in music, and I do know what's needed in the way of equipment and space and all that to do it. Now, I do sub-teaching 4 or 5 times a month. That's all I do, mostly subbing. Once in a while, Kelly, you may know who Kelly is, the sub-office, they get hard up for some more subs because somebody call and say, John, will you go do something else? But music's what I do most of the time. Now, I have been in all 5 high schools, all the middle schools, and you've got 3 now, I think it is, of schools that are kindergarten through 8th. Just this last week, I was out at Westview. I think it's Westview. Have you been there? Oh, that's a beautiful, beautiful school. Beautiful school. Just last week I was out there. Now, there are several other beautiful schools in this town that have been built. Very nice. Kids will enjoy it, you know, and they're good schools for teaching. Teachers have the room they need. They have the equipment they need. This is good. Now, several other of the older schools in town have been renovated so that they're good, you see. But now I bring you to Boyd Elementary. Now, I've been out there several times. I know the music teacher quite a bit. Folks, this is located on Washington Street, just north a little bit of Drury University and Central High School. It is in a section of town where they have a covenant. You can't touch the old buildings. And I guess that probably, what am I talking about here? Boyd would be included in that. They do have an addition to it. There is an old part of it that is about over 100 years old. They've got some new additions there, but you know, they're just not adequate. Now, I understand you have been out there, Dr. Jungman. That's good. And I talked with Dr. Mr. Gordon today, Grandin, the principal, and since I don't have a lot of time here,
Yeah, Mr.
I'm
Baker,
going to
your
pass out a paper.
time is up, but we do appreciate and want you to wrap it up. Please,
Yeah, but
thank you.
I'll just take a little more time. I want to do this to you, ask you to do. I've got a paper to pass out to you that describes all of the imperfections in that school. Now, some of you may have been there, I don't know. But I would ask you to do this. Please read this paper. Don't just throw it away. Take about 2 or 3 minutes to read it, and then do this. I'm sure some of you have done this. Go out and visit some of these beautiful new schools we have in this town. There's some beautiful new schools. I just named one a while ago, the new Hickory Hills. Used to be out on 65. They moved it. Beautiful new school out there, all around. Then I'd ask you to do this, please. Make an appointment to go out to Boyd School and let the principal show you that place. If you do, you're going to find the world difference between all these schools and Boyd.
Thank
Now, I just heard this young man a while ago talk about all the innovations and all the work they're doing on all the schools. This is needed. Why not Boyd? Now, here's what my contention is, folks. I would say you need to go out. You can't do much with it. You can't down the old building because of that covenant they have. Go out and find some new property and build a new school for Boyd. It can be done. You built schools all over this town. You could do it for that.
Thank you, Mr.
No, wait.
Baker.
I'm done.
Okay. Would you have your paper? Would you please give those to Mrs. Luton?
I will, yeah.
And she'll make sure each of us gets that.
That's right.
This evening
Please
before we
take the
leave.
paper. Please read it.
We will.
At least, and then go see these schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Take him to Mrs. Luton, and she will make sure that we get that.
Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you.
Dr. Frederick,
Yes.
I know that we've done this in the past, but could somebody from administration get in touch with Mr. Baker to let him know what has been done in the past? And
Yes.
I know a lot of us sitting on this at this table have been on facility review committees, and as a resident of that neighborhood and as a parent of 3 daughters that went to Boyd, he is very accurate in describing that building, and unfortunately there have been outside influences to keep us from doing things there, but hopefully as we move towards the facilities review, that will be part of that discussion, and having perspective of teachers that have been substitutes that have been in all of our buildings, I think is a really good perspective, and one that maybe neighbors who do not have children in that building need to hear. So
Thank you. And if Mr. Baker stays with us, he will hear in just a few minutes about some efforts on the board to visit all buildings, including Boyd, and I think that will be interesting for him. And yes, we will get a response back to him. Thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll now move on to comments from the board. So we're going to talk about our legislative report, 14.01, and Dr. Jungman has some information for us this evening.
Just briefly to follow up on the conversation of the resolution from last time, you mentioned wanting to follow up with individual conversations with legislators, so we're working on that right now. Some of those have started. Myself, one board member, maybe potentially 2 legislators whenever they're available, trying to get reach out to our senators and reps prior to the veto session, talk about the resolution, talk about the things that are coming up. So that is in the works. Some have started and will continue all the way up between now and veto session. We're still waiting to hear if the board term bill will be one that is raised up for consideration of veto override, but do not know at this point. So we'll feed back information when we know.
Any other legislative report? Very good. We'll move on to 14.02, future issues. Anyone have a comment or something they'd like to share with us on future issues? We know we have some ahead of us.
I would just to mention that you did call for us to get some information on Amendment 3 for you, and we are working on that. We hope to have it for a study session next week. If not, it will be a regular session in September so that you have plenty of time to make a decision on whether or not you want to move forward with resolution in time for the November election. So we'll either have it next week or by the end of the month, so you have October to make your decision. So.
Yes, Mr. Lee.
To make a decision whether we want a resolution or what's going to go in a resolution.
Both.
I think there's a question about we want a resolution.
I think that's what I've heard, but then the content
I wasn't
would
sure
be
what
up
I
to
heard.
you.
I just
There you
want to
go.
make sure. Resolution is in order. I just didn't know what all we want to put in it.
And we're waiting for your direction on that once we get the information
Okay.
sent to you. I think you tell us, yes, we want a resolution, and here's what we wanted to say so we can proceed. And in that vein, I would tell you that our system received an email today. We've been in collaboration, Mr. McKenna, as well as our teacher groups, talking about making sure that our teachers are informed of what they can do. This is a issue that deals with ethics and on clock, off clock. The board has the ability to pass resolutions and release press releases. The teachers are constrained by law about what they can do during work time and work with work resources. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page as we proceed into this time. So that was sent out to our faculty today.
Very good. Okay, that brings us to other. And one thing that I might start out our discussion at other with is that we received a final document. If you recall, on our study session, we talked about board engagement assignments, and that would be our visits to our buildings. And this goes along with what Mr. Baker brought forward to us this evening. We have a final document from Mrs. Luton outlining our plan so that each board member has an opportunity to visit a school, our schools, at least 2 times this year. This way we will know that we have covered all buildings, and then we will have that important piece of what things look like in our buildings and in our instruction piece and the resource piece. I would like to point you to a couple of revisions based on our study session discussion. Is at the very top of the document. We have our purpose, and our purpose is our purpose of the board assignments is to encourage board members to visit schools and observe different learning environments from across the district. So each of us have a list, and those schools are geographically a variety of locations throughout our district. Will include each of us will be visiting a high school and a middle school, several elementaries. Some of our early childhood locations also are some of our option sites and our choice sites. We also have a list of other important sites in the district that we don't. Students are not attending those sites, but they're very important administrative sites that are part of the hard work that goes on in our district. And we also have a protocol of our do's and don'ts. So I think that we're good to go, and we will utilize this component of our meetings in the future to share if we've been to a building and this is one of our buildings, and we're not limited to this list. This is just to make sure that all buildings are covered during the school year. And I think it really helps. I know me as a board member that when I'm out in buildings and I see the students and I see the teachers and work's going on, it makes this worthwhile. Helps to remind me what I'm doing this for. So so I guess at this time, if anyone has, and we're not going to just limit the other to building visits, but if you've participated in a community event that you want to share with each other, because I know that there's folks at this table that I've seen numerous times in the last couple of weeks at different events. So I think this would be a good time to share any information related to school. And Mr. Lee has agreed to tell us about a couple of his visits to start off our discussion.
Well, I had the opportunity to visit a couple of high schools, both of them which I am in quite often, but Parkview the opportunity to be over at Parkview, and one of the things that's really interesting about that is we're putting together a Interact Club, which is a high school Rotary Club at Parkview. We have one at Glendale, but we're starting one at Parkview, and which is great. But what I thought was very interesting more than anything was the students that we talked to and the staff really focused on leadership development, servant leadership, and creating leadership opportunities for students in the school. Not just a service club, not just to get together and do that, but really focus on leadership, which I thought was very interesting. And that was them coming up with that, and I thought that was really a good thing, and I'm really excited about that opportunity. A tremendous amount of excitement at Parkview with their students, their faculty, and their staff. The other one was a lot more fun. A lot of fun was working with Glendale Cabinet with their Ice Bucket Challenge last week, where they had 235 kids do it and raised almost $3,000 as a school. It was a lot of fun watching 235 kids get water dumped on them. But and they were excited about it and their challenges. And I haven't heard of anybody raising that kind of money as a school, for sure, as a group, a community. So that was pretty exciting. They just did a really good job, and the school was really excited about it. And it's been a while since I've seen that bring that group together like that for an issue. So that was a fun thing to watch them and be involved with that effort at Glendale.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Callan? Yeah.
Last Friday night, I went to the Boyd back-to-school picnic at Washington Park. I believe Mr. Renner was there too, because I saw his van, but I didn't see him. There was a lot of activity. Met a lot of teachers. Met a lot of new teachers. One of the teachers that I talked to has been with our district now 3 years, coming from one of the surrounding district, well, not maybe quite surrounding, but a smaller district in the area. Her husband serves on the school board of that district, and she chose to leave that district and come and teach in Springfield. And to hear her rave about her experience, not only at Boyd, but being a teacher in Springfield Public Schools, and the kind of support that she gets professionally, and also from their community partners with Boyd. It made me very proud of this district, but also the community and how we support our schools, and to have that filter down into the individual classroom. So I wanted to pass that along. And then also to see a very active PTA involved in a neighborhood association working side by side. So it goes a lot to what Mr. Baker was talking about, of really needing to have those vital conversations in communities where there is a lot of neighborhood pride, but also aging buildings, and what do we do to preserve quality education and a quality environment in those neighborhoods. So it was a great event. It always is. I was telling Dr. Jungman, they used to have a dunk tank there, and they used to ask me to be in the dunk tank. So actually this year, no dunk tank, so that was really great. Yeah, so I went.
Thank you. Anyone? Yes. Mrs. Bush?
Well, I was pleased to go to the foundation lunch and to see Mike White, who is certainly deserves recognition as one of the important components in what the foundation, or what he does to support Springfield Public Schools. It was a very nice program, and I was glad to be there and again get reinforced about the support that the foundation generates, both in terms of dollars and in other types of support for the school system. Also, Dr. Jungman did an excellent job at Rotary today doing the program. Everybody I heard afterwards was just really impressed. Yes, he does connect with people, even though he is just a kid. Is he really that young? He did. He made a very good impression in the downtown Rotary Club, and so I appreciate his efforts to get out as much as he does into the public. Someday he'll have time to golf, I hear.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr.
I
Hosmer?
didn't have any official visits, but I did have lunch at at Roundtree with my second grader, which is always interesting. But one of the things that was interesting, there's a new principal at Roundtree. We lost our beloved Mr. Martin to Sunshine, and Ms. Patton is now the principal over there. And it was interesting because she was walking the lunchroom, and there was a group of students, and I won't name the class that it was, but they were a little rowdy and too loud, and it was interesting. But she had a little microphone, and she just said, "You guys know what you're doing. You need to figure it out." And she walked. That was it. It was, you need to figure out what you're doing and how you can do better. And I didn't talk to her about that because I had to finish my lunch and get out of there. But I thought it was very interesting to kind of roll that learning back to the kids, and that was it. It was, the kids talked about it. I think they were third graders, and figured out what they were doing that wasn't appropriate, and make it appropriate. So I thought that was very interesting. I also was at Reed Academy, not an official visit, even though it's on my list, but for a 7th grade girls basketball game. And unfortunately, the Pipkin Pirates, where my 7th grader attends, were not victorious against the Reed team. And I did go to watched a couple of the practices at Pipkin and saw Abby Callan's name on the wall as a undefeated team, I think, at Pipkin. So obviously we've already lost that.
Sorry.
But I was impressed at, it was an afternoon basketball game at Reed, and gym was 3/4 full.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of folks over there cheering on 7th grade girls in a basketball game. A lot of excitement.
Right. Good. And I know that Mrs. Bush and I and myself and Mr. Rosenberry attended the Walkable Neighborhood Project results presented by the Healthy Living Alliance. Mr. Rosenberry, do you want to speak to that meeting?
What I observed from that was that those people, all these different community groups that want to advocate a walkable community, see the public schools as key components to making neighborhoods work. And I think as we begin to look at the redevelopment and the development of school buildings, we need to keep that in mind, is that it's kind of obvious, but sometimes we can forget it. If we get a great chance on a piece of ground that nobody else wants, we might put a school there. But really what we need to be careful about is, how do these schools help build great neighborhoods? How do they contribute? And then what do we do with the public school facilities like Hickory Hills, that the old Hickory Hills, that wasn't in a walkable area? Well, you make a tough decision and maybe relocate it for the sake of safety, but also for the sake maybe of using land better. And of course today's news reinforces that. But it was kind of an honor to be there as a school board member, because it just reminds me of what an important public trust we hold as the 7 of us.
Good, thank you. As I shared earlier, I had the opportunity to visit the Mercy Kids classrooms, and then I also visited Carver Middle School yesterday, and had a great opportunity to visit with a number of teachers and staff and the principal there. On my way out, I had the chance to see a couple of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenges going on with staff members, which was a great day for that, because I think it was about 104 degrees yesterday, so they were looking forward to that, actually. And then again, the SPS Foundation Donor Appreciation Luncheon, it was a very heartfelt thank you to the outstanding community partner, which went to Wesley United Methodist Church for their work with York Elementary. And Dr. Laura Hopper spoke to the many things that church does for York, and so very well deserved. And then, as Mrs. Bush mentioned, Mr. Mike White, he received an Outstanding School Advocate Award, which again was very very touching to hear his comments and how much that recognition meant to him and his work over the years, not only financially supportive of the foundation, but also with the his Weaver Wildcats. There's no doubt that was a very, very meaningful activities and events that he's done for many years with school district. And we had our United Way Day of Caring on August 21st, and I think we had over 9 schools that received assistance from various organizations. They did everything from painting and landscaping and organizing science storerooms and curriculum materials. And again, these are all just reminders of how much our community supports our schools through donations of time and physical labor for our students and our families. So those are just wonderful things to attend and be a part of and participate in. If we have no other questions, or any other comments, we'll just continue on in this part of our regular session. This other will be where we can report out of those visits we've made and other events we've participated in. So thank you. So let's move on to 15, our Plus Delta purpose statement. I hope that each of you had an opportunity to review our Plus Deltas from our study session. That was we reviewed that at our weekly board officers meeting, and if you look at those, you just see a very simple qualitative analysis of the results indicates that we received 5 pluses regarding changes to our study session setup, with 4 pluses related to openness of discussion, and that was again a result of our new seating arrangement. So we also received good input for improvement from 3 deltas, and they were all linked to maybe slight rearrangement of our seating, basically no backs to the public, which is understandable if you had your back to the public. And then also we're continuing to work on we want to get away from voting on items at a study session, and we're working on that. We'll continue to work on that. The administration is working hard on planning ahead, so we don't. So that's limited to just those situations that are of urgent nature. So we're working on all 3 of those opportunities for improvement, and so I think some you will see in action at our next study session, and others will be ongoing, and we will see that in time. So please take a few minutes before you leave the meeting this evening and provide additional feedback on the meeting this evening, and because it's very valuable, and again, board officers and administration, we look at those at our weekly meeting. So, okay. Anyone have anything you want to add about Plus Deltas? Okay, we'll move on into section 16, vote to go into executive session. Recommended action this evening is that the board meets in executive session to discuss legal and student discipline matters as provided in sections 610.021(1) and 6 RSMO. So is there a motion that the board meets in executive session?
So moved.
Mrs. Callan, do I have a second? Second. Mr. Rosenberry. So will you please vote? Thank you, and that adjourns our meeting for this evening.